we'll save some time at the end for that. If people want to send anything in the chat throughout the webinar, you guys can address it either at the end or throughout, whatever you guys are feeling. But I'm gonna
Are
hop
you
off.
gonna manage all that, or should
Yeah,
I
yeah, you're
watch
good.
it?
You don't. I'll keep an eye on it. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, but Jonathan, you can feel
All
free
right,
to
so
go ahead.
we good? Awesome. So first, I want to start with just thanking everybody for taking time out of their day to join us today. I think we're fortunate to have two of what I would consider authorities in the space to discuss the topic of reference-based pricing. You know, the relevance of this topic I find somewhat uncanny in that I saw an article that hit my inbox this week from the RAND organization that did a study showing the huge differential in pricing from hospitals. And, we downloaded that study. I'll allude to that in a moment. But I think everything that's going on right now in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, pricing transparency, pharmacy benefit management, reasonableness of compensation, reference-based pricing is absolutely a relevant topic and timely. And it I think deserves a great deal of consideration as it relates to the employer really maintaining their fiduciary responsibility in managing healthcare. So, today's webinar is really based on that premise. And I just wanted to kind of show the viewing audience how we look at managing expenses within the health plan and why reference-based pricing is so relevant in today's environment. So we try to simplify the discussion for employers in that healthcare premiums are really a function of three things: unit cost, or the price of healthcare, times the volume. How often are employees or their dependents going to consume healthcare throughout the year? Plus administrative fees, whether it's broker commissions, compensation, reinsurance, administration, TPA fees. And the culmination of that is really what encompasses your premium. And what we see in the marketplace is a good portion of the population focuses more so on the right of the equation, on administrative fees, which arguably should be somewhere between 15, 18, 20% of the overall premium dollar, but really don't drill down on the unit cost or price side of things, which again is why I think this topic is so relevant if you're really going to be a student in managing healthcare costs. So, Liz, if you could advance to the next slide. This is really the summary of the RAND article. And, for those of you that are interested, please feel free to ask us. We can send you a whole copy. But, when you look at relative prices amongst all hospitals and states that were included in this analysis, they're significantly more than Medicare reimbursements. And I'm not taking any of the content away from today's authorities, but I just want to point that out to share with our viewing audience that there are ways to control healthcare costs. There are many levers that you can pull. The question becomes the cost benefit analysis of pulling those levers. So with that, Scott, I would love to turn it over to you and Heath to begin walking through the content today. And Alyssa will keep an eye on questions that come through from a chat perspective. If it's, topic relevant at the time, she may interrupt you. If not, we'll try to save them to the end and ask some Q&A. So with that, I'm going to put my cell phone mute and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I saw that study from RAND as well. I think it's really interesting data. And I liked your formula. Where we're going to focus today is on the unit cost component of that formula. And, if you think about traditional, traditionally how we buy healthcare, whether it's fully insured or self-funded and we're renting a network, we're really relying on these networks to negotiate the price that's paid for the units of care that we're receiving. And what reference-based pricing is doing is saying that doesn't work. And frankly, it doesn't work because if you think about it, what incentive do these networks really have to look after what employers are paying for healthcare? I mean, if you're a fully insured solution provider and your costs keep going up from hospitals, you raise premium, your revenue goes up. If you're renting your network, again, what incentive do you have to keep costs down? I came from the network world, and frankly, what networks their primary goal is to make sure that they have at least as good of a deal from the hospital as their competitors, preferably the best deal. But even if it's a bad deal, as long as it's better than what the competition is getting, that works. And that's not a good recipe for controlling healthcare costs. And when we get into the data that we'll show you today, you'll see how there's just widespread disparity in terms of hospital pricing and how this healthcare cost trend is being fueled from this environment. So I guess as a little bit of background, I'm founder of 6 Degrees Health. Heath Potter, I'll turn it over to you to take it from here, and I think I'm going to come back and do a demo of our software platform.
Oh, you're not getting away too long. I'm gonna suck you right back into this whole thing. So it's actually fun to be on a webinar with Scott again. We used to do this 10 times a day. It felt like, I mean, just nonstop. As the company's grown, we're spending less and less time together on things. But good to see you there, Mr. Ray. I like your choice in shirts, although orange would be a nice compliment to your ginger. So we'll get going on this thing. Scott's, you can't see it in this picture, but he actually has red hair what few he has left on his head. But okay, so a little history. I don't know. Scott should be doing this slide because he's down to this whole thing. But he and I met back in, I don't know, about 18 years ago or so. But we were doing transplant centers of excellence back then. Worked together at the same company, and I tell this story because I think it's pretty relevant to the programs that have evolved as reference-based pricing. And in the transplant world, you have an abundance amount of transparent data. That was one of the only areas you could get transparent data back 20 years ago. The reason for that is the UNOS, which governs the organ allocation, would require those transplant centers to make the data available in order for them to participate in transplant. And so you would get transparent data, a miracle. We would use that to mitigate the risk of those big claim events, both from contracting and understanding the cost structure to navigation for outcomes. And it was effective. Scott had this Jerry Maguire moment back in 2012 where he said, what we could do this across multiple claim types. Let's go build a company. And 6 Degrees was born. And that's what he did. He put together a research agreement with the federal government for access to CMS claim data, built a platform in which you could source that data. And, back then, this was in 2012, think about how reference-based pricing was being done. It was very, I don't know if barbaric's the right word, but it was heavy hammered. You either accepted the repriced amount or you had to sue for more money. And that made for a fairly unfriendly member experience. And what was developed in 6 Degrees was using data to identify what an appropriate reimbursement amount could be if it was balanced billed. And so thus the negotiation models were born. And you see more of that today. It's not just us that have applied these practices, a lot of the industry has adapted and grown since then, and it continues to evolve. But our goal then was to find a more friendly way of doing reference-based pricing, use data and transparency to apply what is fair and reasonable across our plans, and it was very successful in doing so. We've since built into that, that transplant model that I'd mentioned where we came from. That's included in these things. You start to see contracted models that have growing out of this. Payment integrity is built into these programs now, so they're evolving, and they will continue to evolve as the employee is seeking a higher level of engagement, a higher level of service from these reference-based pricing companies. Something that looks more like traditional network models without the network. That level of service. So that's what we've been building, and we're doing a great job of it. We'll get into some of the details in terms of how we've done this. I'd like to incorporate, and I will, just some of the general industry practices as well, just to give you some general education here and what some of the other folks are doing. So with that, I think let's hit the next slide and we'll jump into it. Scott, you have anything on the kind of how the company was born and the trends that you've seen going back to 2012?
No. I mean, I think the biggest, I don't know how much background the audience has in reference-based pricing. I think just the only thing I would comment on is reference-based pricing has changed a lot in the last 10 years. It was, I think, the biggest fear for the first generation of RBP was the balance of bill. And for a lot of folks who haven't had exposure to RBP, they probably still are over-indexing on that risk. But that has largely, in my opinion, been solved. Most providers, I think, realize that they can't really win at that game, and the data will kind of get into why that is. So it shifted a bit from the balance of bill side to access to care. As we see hospitals that just are really opposed to reference-based pricing, try and create barriers to entry, and that's really if there's a challenge with reference-based pricing, of course there is, because the savings is pretty significant. That's the big issue that we're dealing with now. We'll get into more of that.
So a couple of things I want to hit on, but in terms of how you can use reference-based pricing, but let's kind of explain the model first, in case there's people that aren't familiar with it. And it's funny, when 8 years ago, when we were really getting things rolling, when you'd go out and do a presentation, you had to really take the time to explain what is reference-based pricing. What are the fundamental concepts of it? Because it was new. The indemnity plans have been around for a long time, but the concept of what RBP was something that a lot of modern purchasers weren't overly familiar with. And so let's just take a pause here to kind of dive into that. Reference-based is a data-driven approach to determine fair and reasonable payments. You can determine what that is under multiple different methodologies. The most common is to use some form of Medicare as a benchmark. Now, Medicare isn't going to cover all bases, so you have to have other benchmarks that can be used as well. And you may have other things that are used, like cost plus, or taking the cost of a provider and adding a markup to it. So there's different ways of doing it. The way that we primarily do this is a Medicare multiple. On facility claims, that's typically 140% of Medicare. Physician claims, typically 120% of Medicare. And what we found are those are widely accepted. You'll see our statistics coming up, but let's say 98% of the time, those reimbursements are accepted by the providers that our members are seeking care from. So, as an example, if you had a traditional claim billed at $161,000, and you applied a PPO discount of roughly 50%, you come up with a PPO price around $80,000. What reference-based does, instead of using that arbitrary billed charge, which you'll see in the data sets coming up that Scott's going to get into, is that billed charge will fluctuate from facility to facility, from state to state. It's kind of the wild west of billing practices. Even though you may have the exact same DRG, it's up to the provider to determine what they're going to bill and how they're going to bill. One thing that is relatively uniform nationally is Medicare. And you will find that that fluctuation from facility to facility balances out with Medicare reimbursements. We use that benchmark then to determine what will be paid up from it. So we typically run at 140% of Medicare. In this example, that puts you at $39,240. That savings amount between the PPO repriced amount and a 6 Series RBP amount in this example is $41,599. So it can be significant. The billing practices and the network discounts will vary from state to state. You could be in Florida where you're seeing multiples of 800% of Medicare. You might be in Oregon where it's 500% of Medicare. We are using that benchmark to determine the payable, and the savings will fluctuate based on those billing practices, but on average, you're around 67 to 70% savings over a traditional network plan. So it can be very, very impactful. So, excuse me, not over a network plan, but over the bill charges, average 40%, 25 to 40% off of, or between the network discount and a RVP discount. So I'm sure I just completely confused everybody. So
Hey, Keith.
25 to 40% between a network discount and 70% off of a bill charge.
Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
Just to tie this back into what Jonathan referenced in the opener, the RAND data, what that data looked at was what commercial carriers or networks are paying hospitals. And the conclusion was nationally, like if you look at national average, it's about 2.5 times what Medicare pays hospitals is generally what the average is from commercial health plans. For an RBP plan, just to give you some perspective here, most reference-based pricing plans that we work with are paying hospitals 1.4 times Medicare, so 40% over what Medicare would pay. And that kind of works out here. I did the quick math. If you took that $40,000 RBP payment in this graphic and you grossed it up to 2.5 times Medicare, it'd come out to $70-ish thousand. So that PPO price that we're showing is probably slightly above 2.5 times Medicare. Now, keep in mind, this varies drastically by market. So you could see some markets where the average health plan reimbursements around 2 times Medicare. In some markets, it could be over 3 times Medicare or higher. So it's just there's a lot of variability, but that gives you a little bit of context to this graph. So go ahead, Heath.
I think we're good there. Let's go to the next slide. And we can fast forward one more slide here as well. So one of the things that would continually come up as RBP would evolve was asking, what are you doing that is what you consider best practices? And there's been different ways over the years that you can do reference based. You can do pure RBP where you reprice everything to a benchmark, a multiple of a benchmark, and you don't have any sort of contracting involved. That's probably RBP in its purest form. And you can make that work, and it's worked for a lot of people. You can do reference-based pricing without legal involvement. And what that requires is a couple different things to consider. One is parameters in which one can negotiate balance bills to get those resolved, or a hard and fast stance that you're going to leave the member responsible for anything that is anything that's disputed, and that's difficult. That's a tough ask. Or you put legal in play and have legal representation that either represents the plan or the member in the event of a balance bill. So those are ways that could play out. You can also put in position only type networks or contracting models or narrow network type models. There's all these different ways that you can build reference-based pricing to make it work for the specific needs of a plan. And one of the things that 6 Degrees has always been is relatively a customizable solution. And we recognize that one version of RBP may not be appropriate for the other. And the reason for that is that there's risk tolerances that you will see variability from plan to plan. Some plans are specifically interested in saving money, and that's really all that they care about. You have other plans that are really looking for something better than what they were doing on a PPO, but don't want to have any sort of member disruption. Um, Finding that middle ground, I think, is what most people settle on. And the solution that we built, that we call Ultimate RBP, really focuses in on that. It still allows for some customization, but let me walk through why I think this has been so successful. We have built into it a physician only network. So that gives you the look and feel of a traditional network. It allows for the ability to have a directory that you can steer towards. I don't want to use the term in network, but contracted physicians. In theory, that provides for better access, less access issues that could come from that. And it allows that look and feel of that traditional network that people like. The thing that we have done with that physician only network is we've designed it with Medicare multiple based contracts. And that's a big differentiator from some of the other models that are out there. That allows for you to keep the same methodology in place on your physician access as well. And just like you do on your facilities in terms of how you're reimbursing the providers. And that also allows for us to keep those physician claims at a lower rate, typically 20% over some of the other physician only networks that are out there. I think we're running close to 115% of Medicare on our physician claims. So that's step one of the Ultimate RBP, is building into it a physician only network that we call Pro Plus. Also built into that would be any of the contracting that we do a lot of contracting to support our plans. One of the things that we can do when a plan is going live is what we call on-ramp, and that is collecting the different claim data, the different claim access points, and doing outreach to those physician groups to make sure that they're aware and knowing that this plan is going to be going live and this is how they'll be reimbursed. And those things are incredibly important, because as a plan goes live on RBP or self-funded in general, it's making sure that the person at the front desk is aware that there's alternative options to Blue Cross. And that's really the big point of question when somebody comes in is, where's your logo? And is it Blue Cross, United, Cigna, or Aetna? Obviously, if you're going down this path, it's to get away from those things, because they're just not working for that plan. They're not working for those members. And helping those front desk people know that this plan's going to be with 6 Degrees, and to allow them to come in the door and get care just as they are seeking to do. And so that plan's been very successful for our implementations and the groups go live with us. So something I think that we've done a good job with. The other thing that we've done on this has included MediShield, and MediShield is our legal solution. I'm going to give Scott a few minutes to talk about that after I get through this summary. But we have found over the course of the years that although setting up a negotiation window is incredibly successful, it can require that the plan get involved in terms of authorizing those negotiations. And one of the things that you can do is put MediShield in place so that if you get to the outer edge of that negotiation, instead of seeking additional approval to go above that threshold, you simply turn it into MediShield. And MediShield is a a program that represents the member. It's prepaid legal, and it's been incredibly effective. We run it on our own plan. I've used it twice now on my family. And what it does is that legal represents the member. They then engage with the provider and say, basically the plan has met its obligation, and this is why. And then what they would need to do is collect from the member, but that doesn't happen because oftentimes the members don't have those funds, which is not what is being said, but the facilities know this, and they don't seek after those funds. And what happens is they end up accepting the original repriced amount 95.5% of the time. And so that program has generated additional savings over models that were done just using negotiations, to the point where we're now seeing around 139% of Medicare versus 147% of Medicare under those negotiation models. We built into this the payment integrity program that we launched 3 years ago. What that focuses on are high dollar claims. If you look at your standard book of business for RBP, you'll see discounts around 67, 70% of Medicare. Our average is, I think, just at 68% right now. That PI program is running around 80%. And so on those large claims, it's looking at and having nurse review to make sure that what is being billed should be billed in the first place, so that we're repricing the appropriate claims, not repricing something that shouldn't be paid in the first place. And that has a significant impact on the overall outcome and repriced rates for the ultimate RBP plans. So one other thing that we're working on as well is identifying different stop loss partners that will protect the claim for life in a balanced bill situation. And there's a few that are looking at doing that today. And I should add that that MediShield solution follows the claim for life as well. So a lot of different things built into that ultimate RVP that not only provide great savings for plans, but a very good member experience. And I think that's what's the next phases of RVP is making sure that the member is having a good experience. It's almost guaranteed that savings will be there. The next step is making sure the member has a good experience, they're getting the access that they're seeking, and the care is occurring as planned. So, Scott, I was thinking that MediShield thing would be something that would be good for you to kind of hit on, being a legal mind and all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take a step back and just make sure that everybody kind of understands the underpinnings of a balanced bill. If you set up your reference-based pricing plan properly, and the plan makes the plan benefit payment to the provider, what the balanced bill really is it comes from a contract or purported contract between the patient and the provider. And I actually had surgery earlier this week, and when I was being admitted, they have one of these little digital pads that you sign, and you have no idea what you're agreeing to. I mean, they tell you like, oh, this is consent to care and all this stuff, but buried in the terms of service, there's a provision in there that says, whatever my insurance doesn't pay, I'll take care of the rest of it. And their providers, if they choose to pursue a balance bill, that is the legal basis for their claim. They're saying, hey, patient, your plan only paid us this much, we billed that much, you owe us the difference. And there's a lot of problems with that position, and the hospitals know it. The data that we'll go over in a little bit will give you some insight into why there's a problem with that. These are state law contract claims. State law governs contract claims, and there's a lot of protections for consumers out there. So MediShield essentially is there to help with the really difficult providers, and we're talking single digit incidents. The vast majority of these claims that we reprice and pay never needed a lawyer involved. It's a small, very small percentage, but it's important that you have protection there for these really aggressive providers to basically stand up to them and say, no, this is ridiculous, and you have protection for the members. And as Heath mentioned, just going through that process and letting the providers know that you're just not going to roll over and let them bully you into a ridiculous payment. That largely solves the problem. And we can, when we get into the data, I can show you some examples of kind of what I'm talking about. But I guess we'll leave it at that. And if there's more questions, we can address those in the Q&A.
It's funny, as over the years presenting to and talking about reference-based pricing, we end up focusing on these issues almost the entirety of a presentation. And I could see where, to an audience that would make it sound like these programs are complicated. The reality of it is, to 98% of your members, it's going to look and feel just like any other health plan, with the benefit being that significant savings will be had, by the plan, by which could then be passed on to the members in multiple ways, which could come in the form of better benefits. It could come in the form of expanded benefits to family, or in some instances, it's keeping the doors open for an employer. So that's the important thing to understand here, that there's a lot of good that comes from this, and the other being an open access type model. So on that Pro Plus program, although we're discussing the 800 and some thousand, physician contracts, it's still open access. So you can seek care outside of those and go to a physician of your choosing. My family does that, where in the past, before we were big enough to be self-funded and have our own RVP plan, we were using a local network, and the pediatricians that my wife wanted to go use were not a part of it. We made it an out-of-network case. Now that we're RVP, we have access to those pediatricians. They're able to use the individuals that we want, and that my wife feels comfortable having our kids see, and it's been a huge benefit for our family. So those are the things that come from doing these types of plans, and obviously, having that savings of 139% of Medicare. Those opening slides that we were looking at earlier that Jonathan had, compare that to 250% of Medicare. That's a big chunk of change that is being saved for that plan.
Yeah. So Heath, I wanted to kind of be a bandwagon jumper here for a minute and say, from my experience, the majority of the way these plans were sold was on an Excel spreadsheet and pointing to a lower solution. And the employer bought it, but really wasn't educated on the right way to use the plan and the structure for their leverage. What you're talking about now in the ultimate RBP solution hedges that bet far more in the employee independence benefit from using this strategy, and you're addressing unit cost. And more importantly, you really are acting in that fiduciary role for the plan. Because, I just got off a call 2 or 3 hours ago where HR said, I'm having a hard time getting employees because of our benefits and the contributions. And their fully insured equivalent for a family was $2,800 a month. Now, that wasn't what the employee paid, but, that's a mortgage payment, right? So I think the timing is right as a true fiduciary on the health plan, whether you're in HR or you're finance, to really understand these strategies, because employers are only going to be able to pallet a couple more years of rate increases till the family premium touches $3,000, till the dam's going to break. So I echo your point on building the right safety mechanisms in here, but having to explain away the bad. I just think it was sold bad in the very beginning.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jonathan. I think that what our experience has been in terms of retention of plans over the years. I mean, we work with hundreds of employers, um, but generally, the common denominator for a plan that RVP doesn't work for is one where the expectations weren't set right with the employer. They perhaps thought they were just getting, a cheaper version of a network plan, and the plans that really have they understand what this is and how you mitigate the risks that come with it. Those are the guys that last for years and save a lot of money over the years. But I would
Hey,
agree with
Scott, it might
you. The cost trend is unsustainable. I mean, people just can't keep up with the increases. What was that?
I was gonna say maybe just lightly touch on the fiduciary piece. This is something that comes up on a pretty regular basis, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out in the marketplace in terms of what
Yeah.
that means. It's
Yeah.
something that we have built into our ultimate RVP so that we are a co-fiduciary when you roll these things out, if you want us to be. And I think
Yeah.
I'll kind of put that teaser out there. Scott can hit on it when he goes into it here. So
Sure. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the fiduciary term has been used as a marketing tool by a lot of RVP vendors. As this solution has evolved over the last decade, that one of the early kind of grandfathers of reference-based pricing, their pricing model was based on a percentage, and still is based on a percentage of billed charges, which translates into a pretty high dollar to the vendor. Um, and their pricing pressure has kind of brought some of those price points down, but a lot of the ways that the high cost vendors would justify their fee would be, well, we're a fiduciary of the plan. And then some of the low cost providers that they would kind of push away from the fiduciary exposure. And as Heath mentioned, we have both solutions. We recognize that some of our plans want us to be making decisions that put us in a fiduciary position, and that's fine. And others don't. I mean, I think, as an employer, where we have our own self-funded health plan, and obviously we understand reference-based pricing, and we run this on our own health plan. I don't want to give that duty up to some third party. I want our uh, as an employer, I want to make the decisions about how the plan spend is, and so I'm one of those that wouldn't want to delegate that duty, but others do, and there's no right or wrong way. We're recognizing that we're here to adapt to kind of the preferences and the risk tolerance of our clients, which is going to vary. So Heath, take it back.
looks like a question came in, so I'll kick this one to you, Scott. Can you go to collections faster in this strategy as an employee? I think there's a couple different things to hit on there, both about
Yeah.
some of the NSA and then the concept in general.
Yeah, I mean, so we could talk for an hour about NSA, No Surprises Act, but that's still relevant in an RVP context. If it is an ER visit, for example, there's some protections there, and a whole process that you could go through. But I mean, just generally answering that question, um, there's nothing about reference-based pricing that would fast track you to collections versus a out-of-network claim in a traditional health plan. So, I mean, if you're just comparing it on that level, like I got an out-of-network balance bill in a fully insured product, or a self-funded ASO model versus an RVP, there's nothing that about RBP that's necessarily going to put you in collections faster. Now, obviously, in an RBP context, you have a greater opportunity to see balance bills because you don't have a network, right? And so there's more opportunity. But when you look at the data, Keith, you know these numbers better than I do. What's the overall percentage of balance bill for our book? Is it like
Actually, if you click forward a slide, we've got a whole sheet of stats here that will be in front of you, and you can keep on talking. There we go. I'll go through these once we finish up this summary, but there they are.
so that first pass claim acceptance rate of 98.9? That would be meaning the claims that get repriced without a balance bill, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're seeing a very small percentage that are going to translate in a balance bill, and that would be your bucket of claims that could potentially go to collections. But that's where Mighty Shield comes into play. So if you do have an aggressive provider that is going to go the collections route, again, we have lawyers that are going to be in place to combat that, reverse, strategies to deal with that. One of the benefits of collections in general is if a provider does go that route, which they don't usually, but if they do, that triggers a lot of consumer protection laws. And usually, like, what we see in general is that's typically a fast track to get resolution of a claim, because collection agencies are not in the business of fighting with lawyers. They're in the business of trying to get quick payments to solve these claims. So it's certainly an issue out there, but it's generally not a large exposure for RPP plans.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so looking at some of these statistics, to summarize, RBP under the 6 degrees models and RBP in general create a significant amount of savings. We're talking, for plans that are, 1,000 lives, millions of dollars. For plans that are, in the low hundreds, you're talking, $500,000. It is significant amount of money. And I mentioned the ability to customize these plans. Very much so, we can set up different parameters in which we can engage and reprice and how we handle negotiations. And one of those examples you can see in that first pass claim acceptance rate, 98.9. So highly accepted, 98.9% of your claims are going to run through either Professional Plus as a contracted claim or through RBP as a reprice claim, and it's going to be accepted. For those claims at 1.1% that are not accepted that first time through, that typically is as a balance bill. The term balance bill is the difference between what is reimbursed by the repricing, the original repricing, let's say 140% of Medicare, and what the provider thinks they are due. Now, one of the things that we can do to alleviate some of that balance bill pressure is by setting up thresholds to which we can settle those claims, even if it's outside of the percent of Medicare that we've been assigned. So let's say 140% is the original repriced amount. We're given authority to 200% of Medicare to get those resolved. If the balance bill is over 200% of Medicare, we can also set a dollar threshold to which we can get it settled. The reason you would do that is because, is it really worth hassling over a small dollar claim, a $100 claim, even though it's at 300% of Medicare? Let's pay it and move on. You can see statistically up above there where it says balance bills below $500, 44% of our balance bills are less than $500. 88% are less than $10,000. So by establishing a dollar threshold, we can get these things resolved much quicker with less headache, and everybody can move on. When we've run our book of business by settling claims under $2,500, it has basically a $1 PEPM impact on your total claim spend. So it is significant benefit with very little impact on the total reimbursement levels. And then you apply MediShield to those claims that are problematic that don't get resolved, and you really come up with a solution that is all encompassing, gives great member protection, and you're still achieving phenomenal savings. And that's the stats you see here: Medicare reimbursements with MediShield at 139% of Medicare, total savings close to 67%. We're still doing really nicely on the median balance bill rate, number of days to settlement. And that's because we're still negotiating those balance bills. Those get resolved quicker. Claims that do hit MediShield, you're pushing those out. The two that I've handled under my own family, I think they were around 4 or 5 months. I think the average is closer to 10 months. So that MediShield process does lengthen that, but it's still well within the protections of NSA to get those things resolved before anybody can send anything to collections. And I think the biggest stat here is under the last 3 years of running the Ultimate RBP plan, those groups that were early adopters would be, the 3-year plans. We've seen most of our plans move in this direction in the last year. Retention is around 99%. So really nice on the retention side. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to create and have created a RBP solution that members like, that plans like, that it's sustainable, and that's a nice shift for reference-based plans, is to have that ongoing satisfaction. Okay, next slide, please. Ooh, looks like we're getting long or short on time here.
Hey.
Scott, you want to quickly hit on PI? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know, we're running short on time. Do we want to just run through Medivy really quick and hit on, I don't know if there's any points that we want to touch?
Yeah, there might be questions that come out of that. Let me hit on the technology side really quickly. So PI, I mentioned early in the presentation that it's built into the solution. Just know that means we're looking at those big claims. The large claims are the ones that have the biggest impact on your total plan spend. And that gets an extra level of attention, nurse reviewed, making sure that what's billed is actually supposed to be in that bill before it gets repriced. And then, we're SOC 2 certified, so that's been a huge project the last couple of years that we've been going through. Medivy benchmarking is the tool that I mentioned that we created to really give transparency to the claim. We use that to negotiate from a position of knowledge, and Scott's going to get into what that looks like here in just a second. One slide forward will give us a glimpse at our member app. Very proud of the member app. It's something that over the last couple of years that we have put a lot of energy into to give the what we feel is the best app out there for reference-based pricing companies. But it allows for a directory, so you can search for contracted providers. You can also see basically a red light, green light, yellow light on RBP acceptance, so it provides for that navigation. There's the ability to manage your cases within this. So if you do have a balance bill or an access issue that we're working on, you're going to be able to see it within that app. And then something I'm proud of, I hope it surely works well, because it was an idea that I came up with, was click to call. And it's that front desk person that doesn't understand what self-funded is. I don't even want to say it's reference-based, but just self-funded in general. And they have questions about where claims are going to go, how they're going to be reimbursed. Is if the member doesn't have that dialogue in their own head, you click a button within the app, it contacts 6 Degrees, and we can have that conversation with them and get you in the door. So really excited about that capability. So Scott, I'll let you take over the Medivy app and give everybody a shot at what the analytics behind the scenes look like.
Sure. Looks like Alyssa, maybe can you stop sharing your screen so I can share mine? All right, let's see, enable screen sharing.
And while you're bringing that up, a question came in. Can providers choose to deny care in a reference-based pricing plan? They can. It's not typical, but they can do that. And that's one of the newer tactics that has taken place. One of the things that we do is a lot of single case arrangements. So If they don't accept the reimbursement levels of RBP, well, they do accept other things. And so
Mhm.
we'll use this data that Scott's going to show you here to determine what is fair and reasonable, and we can put together a single case agreement for that care. So you typically plan procedures where you'd see something like that come up.
Mhm.
And then I also mentioned on that Pro Plus product under the Ultimate RBP is we'll do outreach prior to a plan going live to make sure that those providers know that this is going to be a 6 degrees group. They're going to be seeking care here, and here's how you can be reimbursed. So that education goes a long ways. Also, for the member, tons of education that we can provide them and the plan to make sure that that's the conversation that they can have. And if not, you've got that click to call button within the app.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Heath just said is they cannot deny care for emergency room visits. So if a patient's having an ER emergency, RBP, they have to see the patient. But they can create obstacles on elective care. So you want me to go ahead and just do a quick little demo of Medivy here? I know we're running short on time.
Looks like there's a follow-up question that just came in as well.
Okay.
Do you still use a doctor's network from an insurance company? So once you're self-funded, you're not using necessarily an insurance company. You are the insurance company. That employer is the insurance company, so they're the ones paying the claims, and that's where somebody like 6 Degrees comes into play, where we help facilitate that access. So in that situation, you'd have our Pro Plus network, which is a physician network, much like what you'd see with Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Retina. Contracted physicians, you could look those up in the app and get your care there. Now, the benefit to using a 6 Degrees is not only do you have access to those physicians, but you can go to any physician. And if it's not already contracted, then you use reference base to determine the reimpriced amount. Or we can do a single case agreement, so we can help contract and add them to Pro Plus moving forward. So it's a very dynamic program that allows for you to get that care, and we will add the agreements to expand the network as needed for you or for whoever is seeking that care.
Okay. I'll spin through this really quickly. This is a benchmarking tool. I'm going to show you inpatient pricing data for hospitals, and we can do this for any part of the U.S. Let me see here. I don't know why. Hang on a second. We're on a little technical difficulty. I might have got logged out. Let me try this again. It looks like for some reason the system is not responding to me, but usually I'd be able to type in a market like South Carolina or Washington, D.C., and I'd be able to pull up hospitals, but I don't know if it's the screen share or what it is that is not allowing me to do that. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you that, but essentially what we could do is look at a market, and you could look at every hospital in that market, and we could compare their average markups, across their whole book. For example, a Mayo Clinic may be marking up their inpatient bills, say 3.5 times Medicare, whereas Trident in South Carolina could be 15 times Medicare, or Temple University in Philly 17 times Medicare. I mean, there's that much disparity in terms of how these hospitals price their services. And this data is really helpful in terms of us negotiating with the hospital to show them that their charges are unreasonable and they're not, market rates. We can dig in and get all kinds of cost data, show what their cost to charge ratios are. You could have a hospital with a 10% cost to charge ratio, which means they're marking their bills up on average 10 times their cost. I mean, it's not uncommon to see, for example, anesthesia charges marked up 50 times cost. So, I mean, it's just as Heath mentioned, it's a tool to come from a position of knowledge, and it helps to, when you're dealing with a really aggressive provider, say on a balance bill, to show them the data and say this is unreasonable. I mean, why would if you have a provider that's charging $400,000 for a spinal fusion and a hospital down the street's charging 75,000, what economic justification do they have to try to collect that additional money against the patient? They don't, and so it really is helpful from that perspective. I apologize that we're not able to demo
Hey
it.
Scott, if you want to stop sharing, I'll give
Yeah.
some quick real screenshots, and Jonathan may have some things he wants to share as well, but we'll give the audience a look at that.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Heath, it's always fun when you're a tech company and your tech doesn't work, right? But when I look at this, and one of my favorite quotes is Warren Buffett's ex-partner who passed away not too long ago. But he has a quote where he says, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If you have the right incentives in place, you can drive the desired outcome." What we're trying to do for our clients is help them control healthcare expenses, right? And we have all been in this long enough to know that shopping the plan, changing the plan, and changing the contribution has not gotten us where we wanted to be. And really what we've done over the last several years is shift the cost to the employee in the form of high deductible health plans, but tell them they can put money away pre-tax to pay for it. Now that it's their money, I think we have even more of an advocacy and alignment role to show them that these options are out there so that their dollars go much further in accessing care. And that's what I love about your database. And that's where I think the opportunity to teach and educate comes in, because, instead of paying $250 for a claim, and you can pay $165 for a claim, and you have a $5,000 family deductible, it's your money. So, that's when I get excited to see where you guys are going in a true advocate role and aligning the interest of managing the expense for the employer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I just clicked through some of those things just so the audience can see the capabilities, but it does allow you to really focus in on the different billing practices within a demographic area. And we use that then for negotiation tactics, and incredibly effective. So, and we can do analysis on a group. So if this is something that you're interested in, we're able to take your claim data, if it's something that you can get, run a financial analysis in terms of where we think you'll come out in comparison to your current arrangements. And we can also take a look at what kind of disruption may take place from making the change from a physician access. And again, that's something that we can then take, and as you're implementing the program, do that, reach out and make sure that we have avenues set up for no disruption on your plan whatsoever. Getting contracts in place and getting people in to see the physicians they're used to seeing, or the new physicians that they want to go see.
Awesome. Well, I will wrap us up here. I hate to cut it short. I wish we had a little bit more time today with you guys. This has been awesome. Thank you so much to our 6 Degrees reps for a great event today. Thank you for everyone who could join us live and everyone who's watching the recording. Everyone will receive a recording of this event along with the 6 Degrees slides from today. So if we missed out on anything, people will have access to them. I know you guys had a video you wanted to share, so I suggest everyone go check those out. You will also receive an invitation to our next webinar in June with our compliance expert, Sarah Borders, covering Form 5500. So thank you again for Scott, Heath, and Lindsay, and I hope to see you guys in June. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.